This
Advance the,
conference will now be recorded.
you can advance the slides, please.
Okay.
So I wanted to start off with all of you thinking about what kind of person you are when it comes to rules. Depending on your age and when you were born and how you were raised and all of those other types of exciting things, you've got all different kinds of people out there. Some people are rule followers. Being in the compliance world, I tend to be a very strict rule follower. Some people just live and let live. You do what you want, let me do what I want. Other people say that they kind of live on the edge, you know. I don't really like to follow rules unless somebody forces me to. Some people are extremely considerate of others. I think that the rules should be in place for the weakest in the herd, perhaps. And then some people just consider their own needs. And so when it comes to a workplace in general, you have a collection of people who have all of these kind of feelings. If there's others out there that think that there's other kind of personalities you'd like to throw into the mix, please let me know. I think that when you start to look at, go ahead.
Pardon?
I thought somebody said something.
No.
When you start to look at all the different types of people that exist in a corporation, you can see that it's a diversity in personality styles as well. And so people have to really think about who they are, especially when you come back to work. So we all got sent home sometime in February, March, April. Everybody's working from home and you become very autonomous. So it's easy to be whoever you are there. You're just a little square on a Zoom screen every day whenever you have meetings or you meet with employees. For people like myself, I facilitate those meetings between employees. But when they're all working from home or working remotely, it's very easy for their own personalities to be what they are. They don't have to blend them. Can you advance the slides, please?
Sure.
So oftentimes we take those personality types and we put them into a stereotype. So people may consider that young men only think of themselves. They're 22 years old, they're never going to die, so they only think of themselves. Older women, sometimes older women are a very different crowd. You have young people that follow the rules, older people that follow the rules. Younger people are more, I'm going to do this because I've never been around a time when it was different. And older people often stereotype younger people stereotype older people. You have people who have children and families have a different kind of stereotype than people who are single. So you have those kind of stereotypes that come into play in a workplace as well. And again, whenever you are working from home, those things become exacerbated. People who have children are spending more time with children. People who are single actually have some isolation going on there. So all of those come into play. Can you advance that, please?
Sure.
And so it says, how did the stereotypes fit in? So basically, you look at the people's personalities of following rules, and then you look at the preconceived stereotypes that you have based on your own upbringing. So I've become an interesting sort of person in our office. I'm one of those people that says sir to everybody or ma'am to everybody. So if somebody calls me down the hall and says, hey, Kathy, I turn around and say sir or ma'am. It's just the way I was brought up. It doesn't mean anything else. It's a respect, and I give it to everybody equally. But you'd be surprised when somebody else yells out and another person answers, what? That can be a very off-putting thing. So stereotypes are big in a workplace, especially when you're there. Can you advance the slides, please?
Yes.
So then we have another player in this is not only the individuals, but how the companies begin to look at their employees. So this is all pre-pandemic. How did your company look at them? Well, we have so many HR rules these days, as everybody knows. It's almost a hot potato of rules for workplaces. There's many companies out there that are looking to treat every employee the same within a certain pay grade. So they break them down pay grade, they break them down experience wise. Many companies' HRs start to look at, do we really want to hire people that have no college degree? So that's a younger person kind of thing. Do we really want to hire older people that may need more benefits? Do we really want to hire a lot of women that may need childcare? So maybe then we're back to older women, or maybe we're back to single women. So most companies are very careful as they look at the needs of their employees. So you've got the people looking at their company, you've got the company looking at their people and trying to balance all of this. That can be a very tricky thing. Companies are careful these days to balance all kinds of scales, from gender to race to age, you name it. They've got to watch for it. I don't envy anybody in HR these days. Advance, please.
Okay.
In addition to following rules, you look at how companies view, or how employees can view their company. So before the pandemic, when everybody was working, we had a much wider diversity of employee feelings. Some people love working for their company. They can't imagine doing anything else. They are doing their dream job. And those employees come to work every day and they're so excited because they love what they're doing and they love where they're doing it. Those are the companies that typically rank on the greatest places to work in our country. Other employees hate their employer. They bring their baggage to work every day. They may be a rule follower, they may not be a rule follower, but every single day they come to work. And when they come to work, in the back of their mind, they're thinking, God, when can I get a new job? When can I find some new place to work? There's other people that come in and think, you know, I don't really love this thing, but the pay's good, I get good benefits, and it's a means to an end. And so for people like that, they're just doing what they're told. They're getting by. You don't know if they're going to stay. You don't know if they're going to go. And then other people really like what their job is, but they think their company doesn't treat them well. So you've got a lot of different kinds of personalities. You're starting to see a mix of what the company has to deal with in terms of dispersing and taking care of their employees, especially, and again, when you look at something other than a small company that seems to be very homogenous to a nationwide company. So you're hiring from all over the place, you're moving from all over the place, and employees are bringing all of these ideas with them into the workplace. And so it can be quite a mix on any given day. Any given day. Can you advance this, please? Now you're going to add a pandemic to it, which has been the surprise from March, I guess I would say, although some people argue it was not a surprise. We've had a horrible, horrible pandemic to hit this country. And it has taken its toll with individuals, the likes we haven't seen, certainly not in my generation. And employers were told to close down, so they did. So their employees all decided they had to work from home. So now whoever the employees were back before all of this and the complaints they have a whole different perspective, perhaps, that they are lucky to have a job. Now, a lot of companies have brought in folks, believe it or not, to help their employees understand their new work world and the way the new company is. Are all of you independent?
What are these people that you mentioned? What kind of people do they bring in?
They have brought in mostly HR people.
Okay.
They have brought in, I would say, probably some counselor type of people. I know that there's a variety of programs right now where you can do teledoc and you can get some additional counseling if you need something on a personal nature. They have brought in, I guess you would call them engagement individuals that try to keep workers involved. So for our particular company, we have every couple of weeks, they have something to be involved with, and it's all done virtual. So you have how to grill a great steak or a hamburger, or how to have a Zoom party or a Zoom game night to help individuals cope with some of the distance that we have. And it's not work related. You can do this with anybody. We've also had a number of seminars, and I know a lot of companies have, on how to use Zoom tools, how to be in the little box we now see everybody in. So that has been a big adjustment as well. And of course, your companies and your employees are home every day. And so these little bits and pieces of engagement can keep them connected to their friends, to their families, and also to their workplace. Have any of you out there been involved with game nights, for example?
Just by a show of hands, if anybody's been involved in game nights. You can put into the chat window here. Game nights.
Because I think game nights are really good as well. But again, it just involves what kind of person you are. If you tend to work by yourself all the time, then this probably hasn't phased you very much.
Kathy, Cynthia Johnson said yes, and Judith Hayworth said yes. She's played Scattergories on Zoom. That's something new I haven't heard of, Scattergories.
I applaud your creativity. That's great. I think they're now trying to come out with games specifically for everybody that's online. But I think these kind of things are what keep people connected even in this time. Can you advance the slide, please?
Sure.
So adding a pandemic to the mix was very hard psychologically for employees. Employers are scrambling. What do we do? What do we do? How do we get this? How do we keep working? A lot of companies couldn't work virtually. I know restaurants have closed down here in Atlanta. Certainly we didn't have bars. For some reason, tattoo parlors were open. I was a little confused as to why that would be a #1 company to have open, but there you are. Gyms closed down, so people were very, very shut in. Companies, certainly the ones I've discussed and discussed any topics with in the building I work in, didn't know what to do. We had a radio station in our building, and all of a sudden the radio station is closed down and their DJs are working from home. So the offices were very confused, and it took, goodness, probably 4 or 5 months for many of them to figure out how they could function in this world. Now, some companies had to get busy right away. Any company that requires mail or has money or anything like that had to get back up and running pretty quick because the mail was still being delivered. So companies had to face this dilemma that they could no longer operate as just individual entities in the city or in the state. Atlanta, for example, depending on where your company was, you either followed the guidelines with the governor or you had to follow the City of Atlanta guidelines, and they were two different things. So the companies were trying to figure out, if we can get employees back in, how do we do that? So everybody has been scrambling, and the various and sundry folks around Atlanta, to figure out what does that look like. Most of them have run on a skeleton crew, and what that means is essential workers only. So you start to look at how do the essential workers feel? Because remember, the personalities that we discussed at the beginning, you've got people who are rule followers or who believe that they need to consider others, or one that considers more of their own personal needs. All of a sudden, you're being told you are an essential person. You're a part of that skeleton crew. So how do companies get employees to be part of it? Well, part of what I do is to try and help the conversation between those two. We had some employees that felt that they couldn't come in because they were living in some blended families that had multi-generations. But the company still needs somebody to facilitate daily operations. Was anybody else faced with anything like that, or have you been brought in to discuss and help mitigate those problems between employees and companies?
Welcome.
Nobody.
That window.
Well, it's one place to take a look at, because there are employees that truly feel that even being part of the skeleton crew is infringing on their health and infringing on their rights. And companies need to have X number of people in there. And certainly you've got one or two that are willing to go in there, but can you work them 7 days a week ongoing because they're the only ones willing to go into the office? So companies had to look at how to get people on board. And they can send out all kinds of education. They can make suggestions and requests. They can't really mandate. They can't make you come into work in most places. They also had to be very aware of what was happening in the media, because you look at the influx of information that your employees are getting daily, whether it's from TV or radio or their friends at other companies. Well, I don't have to go into work. Why do you have to go into work? How can you be safe if you're going into work? And if you're going into the office, you can't come to my house because we're all staying in our bubble. So all of a sudden, companies have to really figure out what they're going to do. Next slide, please.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
So companies are deciding, what can we do? I mean, you've got a lot of national backup in terms of what are we going to do? We're going to educate our folks on how we're going to handle this. So education is really good, but circle back to what kind of person you are. Are you going to believe your company has the best rules for you? That all depends on what kind of person you are in terms of following rules and liking where you work. If you like where you work, then what the company has to say and educate you is going to make a lot of sense. If this job is a means to an end, or perhaps a place you really hate working, then you may be very skeptical of the education they're putting forward. They can mandate it, or can they? Can a company tell you you have to come in? That's another question. As long as you can do your work from home, do you have to go in? They can certainly request. They can request that you're in 1 day a week, 2 days a week, that you do the night shift that you were doing before. All of these things are areas where employees have to decide if they're going to do this, and companies have to decide the tactics they're going to take. Certainly they can suggest it. They can suggest that you come back in when you feel comfortable. But by the same token, a suggestion also needs to be a mandate if this is an essential worker within the company. Next slide, please.
Okay, let's see, here we go.
So one of the things that I look at is the kinds of things that companies are looking at right now. Do we have our workers wear masks? Do we have our workers social distance? Do we have hand sanitizer? Do we have temperature checks? Do we encourage employees to stay home? These kind of things are being told to the entire US that they're mandatory, that in order to prevent the spread, this is what we need. Employees now expect that from an employer. Employees say, if my employer is not going to provide all this stuff, I'm not going in. Companies, by contrast, say this is going to cost us billions. The thoughts that we have to have a mask for every employee, and what if they lose it? Do I have to give them a new mask every day? Those are huge costs to employers. And while most companies are run by people who are very empathetic at the concerns, you still got stockholders you're going to have to answer to, and quarterly revenues and annual profits. How much money am I going to spend on a mask and hand sanitizer, if you can even find it? And who's going to do those temperature checks? As a company, who's doing all of that? Employees want to know, and companies need to figure it out, because that's the attitude employees have. I don't know who's going to do it. Somebody needs to do it, so you guys need to figure it out. Unfortunately, companies don't really have an answer, because while much of this stuff is mandated and suggested for lowering the spread of this pandemic, there's not good rules. For a social distance, I know everybody's seen the stickers. If you've gone anywhere, every company out there has stickers. If you go to the grocery store, again, here in Georgia, Publix has lines, so does Walmart. If you go up one way, you go down the other way in stores. If you go to Trader Joe's, they only allow a few number of people in the store at any one time, and they have marks outside where to stand. Most of your medical offices and government buildings all have social distancing rules. Elevators have social distancing rules. For individual workplaces, this becomes expensive. Many of the offices have been allowed to open, as you know, with restaurants, 25% occupancy. Somebody in the office has to monitor that. If your offices are all over the country, some of those mandates are a little stricter than others, but 25% is what it is here in Atlanta so far. So that means you have to take your workspace as an employer. Maybe you just redesigned it. Maybe you just opened your office a couple of years ago. Whatever it looked like then, it's going to look real different today, because everybody has to be far apart.
You know what, Kathy? I'd like to see by show of hands how many people feel that you should be required or you shouldn't be required to go into the office with all these rules and regulations, whether it's safer just to have people stay at home. I'm just curious what our audience thinks. So if you can just put into the chat box whether you feel they should stay home or go in and socially distance. If you can share that with us, I'd love to see those statistics. So we'll wait for them to come in to the stats. Yeah, so far nothing yet, but we'll see if somebody responds. Okay. Robert Mayer saying, stay at home for now in most instances. Okay, so he responded. Lawrence said, stay home. Christine saying, depends on the office situation. If you can safely distance, go in unless working from home is best for you. Lots of responses. Lauren saying, difficult question, depends on the job description, but my job is email based, so I'm blessed to be remote, which I do. Obviously, I do online marketing. Here's Judith, it's a good point. If someone has medical issues, they should not be required. A healthy person can be, where is it? A healthy person can be responsible and stay healthy. And Cynthia saying, depends on the role, however, stay at home is best. So I think the consensus, it looks like maybe it's best to stay at home. Kathy, what are your thoughts?
Well, the question becomes for companies that have essential day-to-day operations, whether they're financial companies or other ones, healthcare companies, does that mean that only chosen, unlucky chosen ones, and now we're kind of a Hunger Games situation here, have to actually go into the office, because working from home, you cannot process mail. You cannot process checks. How many of you go in to meet with clients now for any kind of mediation?
In other words, not virtual.
Correct.
So the question is anybody out there doing non-virtual mediations? RD Martin is saying all Zoom. Okay, I'm just curious to see. Josette saying no. Okay, so no, so far we haven't seen anybody have a yes. Lawrence is all Zoom. Robert Meyer, all my mediations are virtual. Christine is saying all Zoom or teleconference since March. Wow. So really, I haven't seen anybody saying in person.
So lucky all of you. One of the reasons that I'm doing workplace issues at this point in time is because there are employees that have to go in. And like myself, we're all considered essential. Next slide. This is the slide. No, leave it here for now.
Okay, sure.
So part of the problem you have then is that from the audience that we're talking to, it sounds like everybody needs to stay home. So what happens then when you're trying to be a rule follower as an employee and the employer wants you to come into work? There's a dilemma there, because there's a lot of employees that don't want to lie to their employer saying they have a pre-existing condition. There's a lot of people that feel very at risk from their employer. Gee, if I don't show up, even that I'm working at home and they have to have somebody in the office, am I going to be the one that gets laid off? And let's face it, employers are not going to lay you off because you didn't come in. They're going to find something else. So there is a real fear from employees that you will be the first to go. And then there's the question of what is the employer liability? So in the state of Georgia, there is a little blurb that has popped up everywhere that talks about the fact that based on some particular rule that the governor has passed, that you come to work at your own risk and that your employer is not held liable for you getting sick in the workplace. That has popped up everywhere. In my community, it popped up at the swimming pool. We have a clubhouse and a swimming pool that shut down. And everybody said, how are you going to shut down the pool over the summer? And our clubhouse said, well, we'll put up the same kind of blurb. We're not responsible. So now you have employees that are afraid not to come into work. And the employer's stance is, well, we need you to come into work, but just so you know, if you get sick, we're not responsible for anything. Has anybody else seen that in their state or wherever they're calling in from?
This is Lawrence Gordon. I mean, I think that's the route that a lot of people are going, but I think what's going to happen, there's just going to be tremendous litigation as we go down the road about issues just such as the one that you're talking about right now. And I've seen lots of seminars and webinars where lawyers are gearing up for this litigation that they expect to come as a result of these issues.
I agree.
Thanks, Lawrence.
Go ahead.
I was saying thank you, Lawrence, for sharing that.
Absolutely. And I agree. I think that there's going to be an opportunity, hopefully, for mediators to work some of this out, as opposed to everybody lawyering up, because I can tell you companies win lawsuits usually. They have a better back staff than the employee does, so more corporate attorneys to litigate these kind of things. The one thing that employers are running into, I see a comment there, Bob.
Let's see here. Okay, so Regina is saying state of Florida employees have been given a special leave bank to use if they are ill from COVID. And Christine is saying, I think we're seeing this now in the school system. My children go to private school and we were asked to sign a waiver. Interesting, huh? Waiver.
Absolutely. I've seen those as well. Lawrence, have you seen the waivers?
I have, but one thing about waivers is, and it depends on which state you're in. In some states, parents can't waiver the rights of a kid away just by signing a form. So that's what I meant about all this litigation that's going to be coming, because all of those kind of forms are going to be under attack. And I think it's going to be quite interesting. And generally, if a lawsuit is filed somewhere down the road, there's generally a need for a mediator. So we should all keep that in the back of our mind.
Thanks, everybody. I agree. I think that one of the best things you can do at this point is to familiarize yourself with what your state's liability is going to be, the position for this pandemic, because that's where you're going to have a tremendous amount of opportunity to get involved with workplaces, especially if there is a cluster of outbreaks at any one company. So many companies that I've talked to have said if they have somebody that gets sick, they will have to close down the offices and completely clean them. Now, I know we closed ours down. We have probably maybe 40 people in our office, and back in the beginning, we closed it down and had to have it deep cleaned. Runs about $2,500. So companies are trying to spend on the front end so they don't have to spend on the back end. And that's what can happen if you have employees that get sick. Next slide, please.
Sure.
So all of this kind of culminates into the new stereotypes and the new opinions that we have of others. So we're now being told what we have to do as a group when we're out and about, whether it's to wear a mask or socially distance, don't shake hands, don't touch other people, try not to touch your face. But I think more concerning is the ripple effect of people in the workplace and the issues that are going to come up, whether it's for an ombudsman or it's for an HR representative or any other kind of person that's going to handle workplace disputes. Because I think now, in addition to the kind of people that were there and the kind of company that it is, I think you also have an element of fear overlaid to workplace items. And that's not a good thing. Fear is something very real. And I don't know that either employees or companies are prepared to deal with it. These are some of the things I've already heard in workplaces. Those old people are the reason we have to wear masks.
Those old people.
Those old people. So for those of us like myself that are old, I already feel the fingers being pointed from me from much younger people that I am part of the problem. Not part of the pandemic problem, mind you, but part of the problem that our company has to have masks now. I've heard I'm fine. I don't understand why everybody's so paranoid. Along those lines, I've heard this is a hoax and I'm tired of having to adhere to the mask rule. I heard that this weekend.
I'm curious.
At a restaurant.
And I don't want to sound like, I mean, are these people that uneducated, or are these educated people that are making these types of comments? This is the things that I just have trouble understanding.
The one this weekend I overheard was a young lady with a college degree, restaurant. Really believes it's a hoax.
Yeah.
I heard somebody at one of the other companies I work with, I only have to wear a mask at work when somebody else is around.
Mm-hmm.
So when you say, what does your company require? That's the answer. You know, if I'm around somebody else, I have to wear a mask. So the implication is it's everybody else's fault that I have to wear a mask.
Right, right.
I've heard I'll just stay in my office and not have to follow any of the rules. So many companies have common areas and they have offices, usually for some of their executives or higher up folks that are on the same floor. So you have offices with the windows, and then you have a lot of desks and cubes and workspaces in the middle. So now you're getting a natural segregation between those people who have offices and everyone who does not.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not based on age or anything. That's simply based on pay grade.
Mm-hmm.
And it is very, very much alive and well that people come in, they go in their offices and shut the door, and they're free to do whatever they want in their little office, but they don't have to mingle with everybody that is not that fortunate. It's awful that we cannot have donut day anymore. I've heard 3 different company folks complain that the social aspect of their workplace is gone. And these are legitimate complaints. Every Friday we used to have donuts. Now we can't anymore. I've heard somebody say, why don't they start making food that's individually wrapped so that we can still go back to some sense of normalcy when we're in the office? So Dunkin' needs to come out with an individually wrapped donut so that we can still have donut day in the offices these days. How much longer is the company going to make us do this? This seems to be a huge, huge issue, is that the things that we're being asked to do as people in our country to slow the infection rates are somehow being forced on us simply by our employers, and we're being made to do it by our employers. It creates a lot of conflict between the employees and the employer whenever it's looked at that way. Instead of employees feeling that their employer is providing masks and hand sanitizer and has set up additional plexiglass like at the supermarket or someplace like that, instead of these being looked at as efforts by the organization to keep you healthy because you have to come into work, they're being viewed negatively by employees. And I'm not sure how we turn that around as mediators, because it's very confrontational, and everybody seems to be exasperated over the fact that these are things we're trying to do to keep everyone safe. The fact that a group of employees doesn't like it, or a group of employers doesn't like it, makes it a very difficult negotiation. I don't understand why those people won't wear a mask. Don't they care? I'm really afraid. I hear those quite a bit as well. I hear those from employees at companies who care for either somebody who's got compromising healthcare issues. I hear it from multi-generational homes. So if you have a grandparent that lives with you, or you have a very young child maybe, or you have a mix of all of it, they're very, very afraid. And again, this goes back to unanimously, this group on the call thought everybody should stay home, but employers can't have everybody stay home in every company. So there is a high level of fear, very high level of fear among employees. I don't want to come to work and be around all those young people who are not taking this seriously. How many folks have seen those pictures on TV of the fraternity parties or the beach parties that young people have had? A lot of people. Can you blame us older people for not wanting to go in the office with all of them? So that's another real issue to think about, how you're going to mediate or help people who are going to be required to come back into the office cope with those feelings. You can't control them outside the workplace. Many of the things I've read off suggest that people, once they leave work, are going to whip that mask off and they're going to go out and party till the cows come home.
Mm.
And tomorrow, they're going to be in the workspace where I work.
Jeez.
So how do you mediate employee conflict that way? You've got employers that are doing everything that they can do to keep you safe, but they can't stop you from interacting and doing whatever you want when you leave. There was a young man outside of a Walmart this weekend that said, "I'm an American and I have my own rights and freedoms. You can't make me wear a mask." That's an employee that's going to go to work today, probably. I'm starting to see magazines advertise. I looked I was at the grocery store this weekend, and there was an article in Cosmopolitan about wearing masks or not. And I'm thinking, wow, if we're having to debate it, it's not accepted by everybody. And what about corporations or LLCs or partnerships that have a few employees and can't afford to give them masks? Do they just shut their doors because they can't afford to do all of the things their state wants them to do? Employees are desperate to keep their jobs. In most cases, they're very desperate to keep their jobs because we keep reading about all the people who don't have jobs, 30 million people, and evictions are going to start coming. So people will do anything for their employer these days, whether they like it or not. So it is a hodgepodge of, can I work during a pandemic? And of course, the last slide that I have just talks about us all being in it together. But it's very much a corporation versus an employee. And there's just so many different parts to that employee that it's very hard to mediate any kind of conflict. Do other people see other things coming down the road in the areas where they are with employees and employers?
Kathy, I'm curious to see, I'm going to interject just because my son called me from just started graduate school, and he has mandatory testing once a week, and the undergrads have mandatory testing twice a week. And if they do test positive, they move them into a hotel, which I thought was kind of ingenious, that, you know, they're really trying to do something that's going to stop the spread. I'm wondering if that's going to take place in the workplace. Do you see anything like that?
I have not seen that so far, because that crosses over into HIPAA laws in terms of they can't really tell us whether or not you've had a test.
Mm-hmm.
HIPAA protects your medical background, and I'm not sure that companies could. Not only that, I don't know if any of you have gone and gotten tests. My daughter also is in graduate school on rotations and was required by Grady Hospital here in Atlanta to have a negative COVID test before she did her rotations there.
Mm-hmm.
And the haves and the have-nots, finding a place that would do it for free with insurance
Mm-hmm.
is very hard, because while you can get an appointment, you can't get results quickly. Finding a place that you could pay $150 at and get the test quickly was easy.
Yeah.
But are you going to require employees to pay $150 if they don't have health care to find out the results quickly? Not every company offers their employees health care.
The city of Tampa has rented a hotel, motel, and is putting people there that can't come to work because of COVID and don't have any place to go home. Yeah, it's no charge.
Wow.
How would that work if you got COVID at the workplace?
I don't know. I just know that one of my friends' child has been put into the hotel because they didn't have anywhere to go home after they got COVID. And I mean, it's a 19-year-old, so it's not not a young child.
I don't know what workplaces will do. I think testing is good. Our particular workplaces, given our, we have an operations manager that's in every day, has given him a thermometer. But he doesn't necessarily want to be the one that takes everybody's temperature when they come in. His feeling is, I don't want to be exposed. And of course, we don't work in a workplace where you're talking about a face shield and full PPE garments and gloves and all of that. Our workplace has the essentials. We have masks. We do the social distancing and hand sanitizer. But what do you think corporations should do in terms of testing or even temperature checks? That's the same solutions that corporations have. Nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the difficulty, is where employees are versus where companies are these days.
Kathy, Madeline says her husband works for an organization that a person must provide test results if exposed or recovering. Employees also must give written documentation from physician if they are in the at-risk group with details.
Wow.
Interesting.
That's very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't seen anything that extensive with the company's employees that I've spoken with. Part of that also wants to beg the question of how much does an employer really want to know? If an employer asks you to get tested, again, it goes back to a liability. If you test positive, is it the employer's responsibility to tell all of the employees that you tested positive? Because this is the person that, when this is all over, is going to have to come back and work in a cube very close to somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
We're not tearing down the design of our offices at this point. I don't know if any of you have been in any kind of workplaces. We're modifying them to try and keep people safe. That's the use of plastic sheeting. That's the use of the clear plexi, like we see at grocery stores or we see at gyms and vets and different places like that. Everybody has modified their workspace. Is that going to be forever? And are employees going to want that to be forever? Because just because we move beyond COVID, is it going to be a situation where we are likely to have other pandemics?
Yeah,
So,
I see the field, especially, well, let me get a couple more comments. Madeline has also added they're permitted to work from home if in the risk group, but must provide the written documentation. And she feels that this violates HIPAA. And Joe says, no, guidance is that you do not identify employee. The question's really going to be for us mediators is really how this is going to take, because you're going to see a plethora of mediations coming from all this. You just have to feel the amount of lawsuits that are going to come because of all this and the amount of mediation. So as us mediators, we feel like we really need to be geared up for this type of situation coming up.
I think you really do. And I don't know what everybody charges, but I can tell you that the majority of employees that I've spoken with over the last 2 or 3 months don't have the money to hire attorneys. They just don't. They're very worried. They want somebody to help them reach some kind of comfort level, whether it's with a local office or something beyond that, maybe a regional office. They want somebody to advocate for them because, again, I go back to the validity aside, people are afraid. And they know that their employer has attorneys available to them. So they need representation. And I think mediators are going to be a great direction to turn for many of these folks.
Absolutely, absolutely. You have any other closing statements? Because we're going to need to wind it up within the next.
No, I don't. I think it's something that people should continue to investigate and move forward with and communicate about what they find.
Exactly. And really, I really want to thank you, Kathy, because this is really a very timely topic. And that's something that we're trying to provide all our members. I am going to record this, or it's being recorded. We're going to be putting it up on the, we call it the SoundCloud, and it's available for free for anybody that's attended. I have the list. If you did attend and somebody else wanted to do it, it's going to cost them $10. But anyhow, I really want to thank everybody for attending. And next month, hopefully we'll have some just as interesting content to share with the members. So thank you again, Kathy. Thank you very, very much. And we're signing off now till next month. Everybody take care and stay safe. Bye-bye now. Take care.